Okay, next problem. Well, this looks like a mess. Since it looks like a mess, try to simplify it first. Try to make it look more normal. And so this is starting out as a rational equation. It's a fraction. It's a rational equation to start out with. And so the first thing I really want to do is clear those denominators. But right here, I am going to need to factor that guy. So working on clearing those fractions first, I'm going to have x plus 3 plus 2 over x minus 2 equals x squared plus 5x minus 14 over. Okay, factor it. First two terms have to multiply to be x squared. There's only one choice there, x and x. The last two terms have to multiply to be negative 6. And so I'm going to pick negative 3 and negative 2. And then the center has to work out to be x. So just checking the factoring, I'm going to get 3x there. I'm going to get negative 2x, which is x, so the factoring checks. No, you certainly don't have to show that. Now, a little comment about these rational equations and factoring. Not the way they do mathematics. And not the way they do mathematics, but the way they write textbooks. We were almost guaranteed with 100% certainty that x squared plus x minus 6 was going to factor to x plus 3, x minus 2. That's just the way they write textbooks, that almost always kind of the smaller denominators present, well, if you put those guys together, we'll give you the quote-unquote bigger denominator. So you're almost guaranteed, not 100%, but almost guaranteed that whatever you have to factor is going to use at least one, if not both, of the other denominators there. Now, one other thing we need to remember about rational equations is our restrictions. Remember, for the restrictions, you can just look at the denominators, set them equal to 0. So I have one restriction of x equals negative 3, and another restriction of 2. And remember, restrictions are the things that I cannot accept as answers. So my common denominator here is x plus 3, x minus 2, and so I'm going to multiply everybody by that common denominator. X plus 3, x minus 2, x plus 3, x minus 2, x plus 3, x minus 2. And then cancel. And then what remains, we distribute. So I've got 4x minus 8, cancel, distribute, plus 2x plus 6 equals, and on the end, everybody cancels, and so equals x squared plus 5x minus 14. Keep making it look pretty. So I'm going to have 6x there. Minus 2 equals x squared plus 5x minus 14. And now that I've done everything I can kind of do to it initially, I see right there that square. That tells me it's a quadratic. We're going to factor. But my first step is to set it equal to 0. And again, it doesn't matter what side the 0 is on. So I'll subtract the 6x from both sides and add the 2 to both sides. And I get 0 equals x squared minus x minus 12. Now that it's equal to 0, now I can factor it. Again, my first terms have to multiply to be x squared, so I only have a choice of x and x. My last terms have to multiply to be negative 12. So you got plus 2 minus 6, negative 2 plus 6. You got, various choices. But what's going to work here is minus 4 plus 3, but then the way you check that is to look on the inside. I've got negative 4x. Look on the outside, 3x, which gives me negative x. So the factoring checks. And you certainly don't have to show that, but you should think it. Does my factoring check? And it does. And now that it's factored and equal to 0, so we split it up. And we just get it on the page here. X minus 4 equals 0. X plus 3 equals 0. For x equal 4, x equal negative 3. And so you happily type those into the computer. You say 4 and negative 3, and you feel okay because you saw the x squared, and you remember on the previous problem I said, well, square can have 2 answers. But what I really said was square, you can have up to 2 answers. I didn't say square, you will have 2 answers. I didn't say that. I said up to 2 answers. And so you type that in there, and it tells you you're wrong because we have forgotten, and we can go down and check it, or go up and check it real quick. Negative 3 was a restriction. And so this guy's gone. That was a restriction. And so we have an answer just of 4. And we can check that as well. Doing the same thing that we've done, checking things graphically. I get everything on one side. So I just move that whole fraction to the other side. Then you're going to press your y equals, and you're going to type that stuff in there. And now be careful when you're typing fractions, that the entire, if your numerator and or your denominator is anything other than a single simple variable, you need parentheses. So when I type in that first fraction, my plus 3 is in x plus 3 is in my parentheses. When I type in that second fraction, my x minus 2 is in parentheses. And then the last fraction, the entire numerator, entire denominator in parentheses. So you set it equal to 0, press y equals, type it all in there, and then graph it. And then there's the graph we got. We got an answer of 4, and the x-intercept should be 4, and that absolutely checks. And so these things can be checked. Okay, so that was solving by factoring. On to the next method. Solving by the square root method. The square root method relies on the following fact. If x squared equals c, then x equals plus or minus the square root of c. And so there's the big thing there, that you got it, when we're going to take the square root of both sides, you've got to remember to include a plus or minus. So steps to solving using the square root method. If the equation contains a fraction, clear the fractions. That's always just going to be a common first step. 2, rewrite to the form square term equals a number. If the equation can't be expressed to square term equal a number, you may not use the square root method. So you're not always going to be able to use it. 3, take the square root of both sides, including the plus or minus on the constant side. Forgetting the plus or minus is not a minor mistake. Forgetting the plus or minus means you're leaving out half of the answers, and so you're going to lose at least half credit. It is not a minor mistake. Anytime you're solving equations and you take the square root of both sides, you have to include a plus or minus. It's actually if you take the even root of both sides when you're solving equations. We're probably not going to run into 4th roots and 6th roots, but just in general, when you're solving equations and you have to take the even root of both sides, you include a plus or minus. 4, simplify both sides of the equation using imaginary numbers when necessary. 5, finish solving. 6, check. Again, checking, good habit, but not required. And so let's do this first one. First of all, note that involves only x squared and numbers. And so that really is a perfect setup for the square root method. That's good for square root method. So the first thing I have to do is isolate the square. So I'm going to get the x squared alone. So I'll add the 12 to both sides. So I'll get 3x squared equals 24. Divide both sides by 3. So I get x squared equals 8. And now that my square is alone, the magic step, I take the square root of both sides, including a plus or minus. And why this works is square roots and squares are inverse operations. So the square root and the square cancel, leaving me just x. And then over here, I'm going to simplify my radical. So 8 is 4 times 2, and I get x equals plus or minus 2 square root of 2. Now, on the computer does not have a plus or minus. For computer, you will type in square root of 2 square root of 2, negative 2 square root of 2. Computer doesn't have a plus or minus. I didn't write the computer on the other. And so there would be my answer. And then this too can check. And we're going to check these in the exact same way that we've done the others. Move all the terms to one side. And I went ahead and called that negative 24, but you actually wouldn't have to. You could say 3x squared minus 12 minus 12. Your calculator's not going to care. Move everything to one side, press y equals, and type in what you have there, 3x squared minus 24. And then the x-intercepts should be that. And I did not get a picture for you, so let's get a picture. Y equals, clear that. So we said it was going to be 3x squared minus 24, zoom 6. Now I don't get the full picture, but I don't need the full picture. We said plus or minus the square root of 2, and then changing that to a decimal, that's roughly plus or minus 2.8. And if I zoom in a little bit, so you can see it a little bit better. Is it going to focus for me? Apparently not. There, focus. We said plus or minus roughly 2.8, and it looks like it's crossing almost exactly at 3, but almost 3 and negative 3, almost. Well, 2.8, negative 2.8, almost 3. And if you want to do a trace, you could trace to, let's see if we get there. There we go. You can trace to the intercept and see what it's close to. And I can't particularly get too close to the intercept, but there it's a little bit too small at 2.7. There it's a little bit too big at 2.9. And so saying that the answer is probably 2.8 is good. So again, these things are going to check the same way we've checked all of them. You can graph them and see that the x-intercepts match up. And we'll end this video.